Australia's 1.7 million population hit. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee and let's have a look at this article from news.com.au by Frank Chung regarding, well, the population hit to Australia. 1.7 million less Aussies by 2031 due to migration crashing. So the impact of the coronavirus pandemic is rapidly changing Australia, and the effects will be large and long-lasting, experts warn. And of course, this is going to have a huge impact on the property market, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, where properties have shot up a lot. And the majority of our population growth for some time now has been driven by migration. Migration is lifting our population. Harry Dent was arguing that you'd want to keep population growth going in Australia because it's going to drive, this is before the pandemic, to drive up your property prices, or at least to keep them going. We don't have some of the challenges, the demographic challenges that other countries are facing. And now it looks like we're going to hit them. So, Australia could finish the decade with up to 1.7 million fewer people than had previously been forecast as a result of the large and likely long-lasting effects of the global coronavirus pandemic. In the best case scenario, one of three outlined in new modelling by McCrindle Research looking at the impact of COVID-19 on Australia's population levels, the country will suffer an impairment of 741,000 people by 2031. And that's going to mean less demand on our infrastructure. It might actually make our GDP per capita come back up to trend levels, the growth. Since GFC, it's been below trend. We've still been growing, but we've been growing littler by littler every year. Well, that could mean lower house prices and less congestion on public transport and better ratios of our potable water to population. It could also spell big trouble for Australia's economic recovery, construction sector and infrastructure projects. All the infrastructure investment is because of our population growth, said researcher Mark McCrindle. You don't get improvements in public transport, new bridges, roads, let alone port facilities and airports without significant population growth. That's why it does add to the livability of cities. He added, the other big one that will affect people is slowing property prices. Oh, that will be the biggest one here. This is why I would argue for, rather than having infrastructure investments in these roads and all these other, pork belly projects all around the country, is to look at instead experimenting with special economic regions through parts of Australia to give us to allow us to be competitive on a global scale. Maybe rather than the government taking our money and pissing it away on projects, they reduce the amount of money they take from us. There's a novel idea. What about that, guys? What about that? While it has some benefits for people trying to get into the market, it could hurt the economic activity due to the wealth effect, which posits that rising house prices make people feel wealthier and thus spend more, which, has been documented to occur, and it does occur more with housing than anything else. That's why they want to push housing up. To hell with inflation, to hell with this, to hell with the market, chuck money at it. LNP, $1.1 trillion, guys. 1.1 trillion. Last week's federal budget revealed net overseas migration, arrivals minus departures, is expected to go into reverse this year for the first time since World War II, with a loss of 72,000 people as a result of international travel restrictions and economic recession. He said losing more people than we gained is unheard of. Well, so is having our first recession in 28 years, and government interventions on our restrictions and freedoms. I'd be interested to see how this is calculated per state. Do you think Victoria is going to lose more people than any other state? He warned population growth had done a lot of the heavy lifting. It done most of it, really, in Australia's economy in recent years, accounting for roughly 1 percentage point of annual GDP increase. There you go. We're not built by the sheep's back anymore. Australia's built on the back of the migrants coming over here. Which, is fine if you have the rest of the country keeping up with it. But they're just obsessed by it. Everything's tilted towards property. If you're bringing people over here and you encourage investment in businesses and infrastructure innovation, that would be very different. It was different from when my father got migrated to Australia, when they were paying to bring people over here with skills. When his cousin came over, got off the boat in Adelaide and got a job in Hobart, and he was there for most of his life. Not in Hobart, in Holden, sorry. He got a job in Holden in Adelaide, and he was there. He worked there as a machinist. Over the past decade, migration has accounted for nearly 2/3 of Australia's total population growth. That's it, guys. You got to get out there and have kids. Come on. Go on. We're below replacement rate. Keep pumping them out. Don't believe any of the crap the hippies tell you about embodied energies or children bad. But that's the stupidest rubbish that they've ever seen. Most of them, I guarantee you, have never actually done the calculations on that, on carrying costs. We did it all at architecture school. We had all these hippies feeding us this stuff. And this is when I became really skeptical of it, because I was reading about it all and questioning about it, and all of the stuff they were saying didn't make any sense. Like, they were talking, architecture is a really hippie profession, guys, okay? There are lots of Greens members in my profession. So I'm kind of, well, I don't know. It depends. When I'm sitting around the table at practice committee, when I was involved there with all the other directors, the older generation, they didn't seem to be that soft, but there were a lot of them, a lot of the younger ones. I guess they haven't had the reality of life slap them in the face. But, like one example, they're talking about all this green technology, and you're thinking, okay, you're essentially doubling the cost of these projects to build. For what's the payback? What's the economic payback? You know, look at that embodied energy that you take to put this product into the, this installation all through these buildings, when you're saving energy that's going to take 50 years to pay back. And, that was wrong, I think. Well, not really, actually. It wasn't too bad. In architecture, for one thing, at least back when I was doing it, you could, as long as you can have a justified position to make your argument, you were fine. You actually did quite well. So, unfortunately, in other degrees, that's not respected. So, prior to COVID-19, oh, here we go. Last financial year, the country added 232,000 people through migration, compared to just 142,000 through natural births minus deaths. Prior to the pandemic, the ABS projected Australia would grow to a population of between 29.5 million and 31.2 million by June 2031. That's an increase of more than 4 million people from the June 2019 count of 25.4 million. McCrindle's modelling more or less leaves assumptions for natural population increase unchanged, but assumptions around net overseas migration must be entirely rebuilt. The government's international travel ban has been in place since March. Treasurer Josh Frydenberg and Tourism Minister Simon Birmingham have warned border restrictions could be in place until late 2021 unless a vaccine is found. In McCrindle's first scenario, the snapback and effective vaccine helps along a fast global recovery from the pandemic, and Australia's migration levels quickly return to the 16 and 19 average of 237,000 people. By 2031, Australia's population would reach 29.6 million, 741,000 below the pre-COVID-19 ABS baseline. In the second scenario, a delayed recovery, the population would reach 29.3 million, 1 million below the baseline. In the most dire scenario, impaired migration describes the recovery extending into early next decade, with net overseas migration only returning to 200,000 by 2030. Temporary skilled work visas and higher education visas decreased by 20% due to a contracting global economy in this scenario, and there is a net loss of 1 in 3 visitors and working holiday makers. Depending on the relative public health outcomes between the countries, there could also be a net loss of Australians to New Zealand, they warn. Under this scenario, Australia's population for 2031 is forecast at 28.6 million, 1.7 million people fewer than in pre-pandemic levels. Mr. McCrindle says, whichever way it goes, Australia should brace itself for significant impacts. Everyone in the cities agrees we are perhaps a bit overheated with the numbers, and it does give us an opportunity to have a national conversation about migration. It was set and forget assumptions, he said, but I think the next few years will bring a bit more pain than otherwise would have. Outspoken entrepreneur Dick Smith has long campaigned for a reduction in migration numbers, calling Australia's population growth a Ponzi scheme. Well, yeah, I mean, it's fueling property, guys. It's fueling property. Earlier this year, he said the COVID-19 crisis presented the perfect opportunity to create a population plan. I think there needs to be a plan. It's pretty obvious you can't grow forever, he told Sky News. Well, we just need to open up the interior of the country. Let's have our manifest destiny here in Australia, and let's allow, land grabs for people. They'll never let it happen. So, it's a type of Ponzi scheme because our entire economy requires its endless growth in the use of resources and energy and more people. That's ridiculous. Surely, it must be able to live in balance. He added, if we reduce migration to 75,000 a year instead of the record 200,000, we'd end up with 30 million Australians. I think that's okay. Mr. McCrindle said, as a nation of immigrants, Australia generally had a favourable view of migration. But at the same time, Australians say a pain point is public transport was getting congestion, commute times were increasing, wait times for public schools and hospitals were going up. Maybe we're growing faster than we can cope with, he said. That's why generally people have wanted to see a slowdown. So what do you all think, everyone? Do you think Australia needs to slow down its migrant intake? Do you think it will happen? Do you think it will happen? Or will this be the magic lever to continue to prop up the property market that we'll start to see? Maybe paid migration back to Australia. What was it, the $10 POMs? I know Horst got a ride. My dad got a ride on his boat over here from Germany. He had experience. He was a tradesperson. Actually, yeah, he was. He was a painter and a draftsperson. Although it's funny thing is, my mother was the only one that always painted our houses. Anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts and opinions. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you're a fan and want to support the content I create here, there are a few ways you can. You can join the channel on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us using our affiliate links at Amazon, eBay, Independent Reserve, or Kucoin. You can buy merch from HeiseSays, use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or support us via PayPal. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. I'll see you all in the next episode.